All right, Casey, what's your story?
I used to not look at my bank account because I didn't want to know how much was in there. That's the position that I was in.
This is Casey, a normal guy who had never started a business in his life. But one day, that all changed.
We had emptied our savings account. We made the decision to move in with my mom, and I quit the restaurant. That moment changed my life forever.
Then, after a few months of work, the idea was ready.
So we get the inventory, we get the website launch, hit go, and guess what happened? Nothing. Nobody came, nobody bought one.
But in his darkest moments, Casey experienced a miracle.
The next day, we did 3 or 4x sales. And I remember like dancing in my living room, right? Like, this is it, this is the moment.
But what goes up must come down.
We didn't know what the heck we were doing. We had no money for marketing. And I said, well, emailing people's free. And from that moment, everything changed.
This is a story of how Casey Holliday went from working a restaurant to selling over $100 million worth of silicone wedding rings from his mom's living room. Welcome to Starter Story. Casey grew up like most normal kids. He wasn't building businesses, he was playing sports and chasing his dreams. One of those dreams was to move to LA and become an actor, but those plans all changed when he met his eventual business partner, Ted.
He also managed a restaurant in Beverly Hills at the time, and he said, well, why don't you come work at the restaurant? So I then started working at this restaurant in Beverly Hills, and Ted managed the place, and I bartended and waited tables.
A few months later, both Casey and Ted get married. And one day, while they're bussing tables at the restaurant, they realize they're both experiencing the same problem.
It's like, hey man, you got married, awesome, congratulations. Like, are you wearing a ring? And I was like, yeah, I'm wearing one, but it's been a pain. Every time I go work out, I go play golf, I do whatever, I take it off, and I'm a super forgetful person. I was excited to wear one, but I was always losing it, and it also didn't make sense. You don't wear a Rolex to the gym, you don't wear dress shoes to run a triathlon. Like, people have very specific accessories for very specific things that they're doing. And then both of us said, well, let's just see if anything else exists. Like, this must be out there. And I remember Ted going, I'm just gonna go buy one. And him coming back and going, it doesn't exist. Like, it's not out there. I couldn't find anything. So Ted and I are there, and the light bulb goes off for me of like, what if we did this?
Despite having no business experience and trying to make it as actors, the boys were excited to start building their own thing. Something that had more potential than clocking in and out at the restaurant. They decided to give this business thing a shot.
It was this really cool agreement between two dudes of, I don't have a kid, I don't have as much life overhead as you do. I have time and energy and effort, but you have savings, and can we just handshake deal that we're both gonna put what we have into this with what our life can afford at this time? Yeah, let's do that. And so my goal was to replace a $2,000 a month income at the restaurant. We didn't call it finding product market fit. We didn't call it bootstrapping. In our minds, it was a couple of broke dudes trying to figure out ways to get people to wear and buy our product. And I think there's something really interesting where when you are starting anything, you have an idea for a business, you don't really know what you don't know. You don't know things, but you actually don't know what it is. And the best way to learn what you don't know is to talk to people that know what you don't. And so when I think about Starter Story and why I fell in love with it, it is a library of inspiration, practical advice, stories that you can learn from and apply to your own situation. So whether you're looking for a product that you want to be inspired to try and launch yourself, or you just want to find about rad entrepreneurs that started where you are so you can see yourselves in them, I think Starter Story solves all of those problems.
So if you want to check out Starter Story and learn from people just a couple steps ahead of you, head to the first link in the description. But let's get back to the story. Casey and Ted are excited, and they even come up with a name for their brand, Kalo.
I'm one of the co-founders of Kalo, so I'm the president of Kalo currently.
But there's a small problem. They still have no idea where to even start.
And Ted had this idea of, well, he was like, I have a friend who has a manufacturer in town. What if we crashed the meeting at this fancy hotel in LA? I was like, sure, man, let's go for it. We got nothing to lose. So sure enough, we did. We showed up. We had bought a couple of rings from, I think, the local Marshalls as just an example of, metal rings. Sat down with the manufacturer and said, can you just make these out of silicone? And he said, yeah. Sure, why not? Ted had very little in his savings and I had even less. We combined them and said, let's just put everything we have toward buying this first batch of inventory. I used to not look at my bank account because I didn't want to know how much was in there. I just wanted to trust the fact that my rent check wasn't gonna bounce. That's the position that I was in. And Ted had a kid at the time. He was a bit older than I was. He was risking more than I was initially to get started, but we had emptied our savings account.
Casey is 3 months into his marriage and realizes he's dead broke. He's not sure if he'll even be able to make his own rent.
So my wife and I, we made the decision to move in with my mom to focus on being able to build the company. I would still commute 5 days a week to work in the restaurant. I would take the 7 a.m. shift, and my wife worked there too. She would have the 11 a.m. shift. She would sleep in our little red Fiat in the back lot of the restaurant in the morning until her shift started. Bless her. So our homes became our offices. Our dining room tables became where we developed our website. And his garage became our inventory management location.
Despite all the personal and financial troubles Casey and Ted were going through, there still was a light at the end of the tunnel. These rings were the ticket to their freedom. And after months of working and waiting, the first batch of inventory finally arrived.
The rings were sitting in the garage and the boxes were stacked to the ceiling, lined along Ted's garage. When I opened up one of these boxes, so excited to see the first Halo ring that had been manufactured, to realize the product quality was awful. Each ring was unsellable. So you had just emptied all of your savings accounts, put all of this time, energy, effort into getting these rings. The first batch of rings shows up and they're unsellable. But we need to make them sellable because we don't have any money left to buy more.
Casey and Ted realized they just made the biggest financial mistake of their lives. They'd just thrown tens of thousands of dollars down the toilet and emptied their bank accounts. Now they had two options: shut down the company or find a way to fix the product.
What happened is a ring would show up, it would be uneven edges. It just was, nobody wanted to wear that. And I remember stumbling, like going through my mom's bathroom and finding this tiny little pair of scissors that I didn't even know existed in the world. Turns out it was a pair of eyebrow scissors. And so I remember rushing out to my wife, grabbing a tiny little ring and putting my fingers in these little scissors and just twisting this ring around while I just sort of trimmed the edges of it. And sure enough, there was a ring that was sellable.
They found a solution, and the goal was now clear. Hand trim 50,000 half-inch silicone rings with eyebrow scissors. But the days ahead were anything but exciting.
My wife and I watched all 6 seasons of Lost while laying in bed trimming rings. It was completely immersed in our life, and I remember I'd wake up in the middle of the night and grab a drink of water, and I would step over piles of rings because we had no place to put them and they were just laid out. And we would have ring shavings all over our house, stuck to our cat, on our tables, in our cushions, in our bed. Like you'd get out of bed in the morning and like you'd have like shavings like stuck to your back because you were just trimming rings in bed. That was our life. And then up in LA, it was the same for Ted.
The mission was finished, and after getting a couple thousand rings ready to go, it was time to conquer the next challenge: finding customers.
The thinking was, the only thing that's stopping us from selling a ton of these rings is a website. I remember toiling over whether or not we were gonna buy a $99 theme. I remember stressing out so much about whether or not we could afford this $99 theme or if we should just go with the baseline model that Shopify gives you out the box. So Ted and I had spent months. We've finally built this thing. We've put the effort in, we've put the time in and the money. And I remember just hitting publish. Website is live. Ted and I are fired up, texting each other. And then about noon the next day, it was like the text message tone changed from we're launched to, any visitors? Like, is anybody coming to this thing? Have you told anyone, bro? Hey bro, have you told anyone?
Turns out people won't magically find the website you've built. So with close to $0 in their pockets and over 50,000 rings sitting in their garage, Casey and Ted needed to figure out a way to put Kalo out there without spending a penny on ads.
I thought, who are people of influence? This was before influencers. Who are people of influence that I could send my product to that would maybe supercharge our growth or get more exposure for us? And one of them was Andy Dalton. And Andy Dalton was the quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals at the time, and I'd gone to TCU, and I was good buddies with his wife there. And I thought, well, I'm gonna send Jordan, his wife, a Facebook message. Hey, congratulations on getting married. We just started this company. I thought Andy might like one. Would he be interesting? Could I send it to you as a wedding gift? Sure enough, a couple months later, she responded and said, hey, Andy would love to give one a shot. And I remember like dancing in my living room, right? Like, this is it, this is the moment. So I sent it to him and I got a thanks, and that was about it. Nothing else really happened. Fast forward to a couple months from then, there's a show called Hard Knocks on HBO. The first episode aired. 10 minutes of the episode was about Andy wearing a rubber wedding ring. And they interviewed him. In the interview, he was like, oh, I just think it's really cool. I can wear it no matter what it is that I'm doing. I can wear it out on the field, and it represents the commitment that I've made to my wife, which is super important to me, but also represents what I do for a living. Which is, we could not have sent him a script that was a better way of articulating exactly what our positioning was as a company. The next day, I think we did 3 or 4x sales. We would line up the envelopes and put the labels on of the customers, and this was the first time that it went all the way to the end of the house and we had more orders. This was this moment for us of, this is real, and watching orders laid out all over my mom's house with trash bags of rings that we were yet to cut, with eyebrow scissors littered everywhere. So it was very much this moment in time where there was validation, there was an uptick in sales, there was engagement and people were talking, but 2 days later, everybody goes back to living their lives. And it's what you do with that attention in between your next venture to try and get more attention or have another moment that ultimately matters the most. So this moment with Andy felt like affirmation, which was really cool. But it also was terrifying because you realize, oh, this thing could become something and now I actually have to build it.
I started to wear Kalo rings several years ago.
Kalo wedding rings.
Kalo.
Kalo ring.
Kalo ring.
Casey realizes that Kalo has outgrown being a side hustle at his mom's house. At this point, he's got to make a decision if he's ready to go all in and quit his job at the restaurant.
So that was, I think, the inflection point of now we're going for this, so now we behave differently. And I was coming to Ted going, hey, I think I should quit working in this restaurant and go full-time into Kalo. And he's like, we can't afford for you to go full-time. He's right. And I was like, but I think we need to. Like, there's something here. I think I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take a risk. I'm gonna go for it. And he was like, okay, all right, fine, go for it. And I quit the restaurant. That moment changed my life forever.
Now, it was make it or break it. Casey and Ted went all in and there was no going back. From that point on, it was a ruthless game of business.
A big part of our early strategy at Kalo was the recognition that we were the first mover in the category, and that if we didn't go fast, somebody else with more money, better brand recognition, better operators were gonna come in and crush us. Over the next 6 to 8 months, we ended up with about 13 people in a 200 square foot office. When somebody would call our customer service line, nobody in the office could talk because everybody could hear everyone in the background when they called. And we moved to a new office. We were hiring on average about 2 to 3 people a month. And I remember sitting in every interview, building out systems, trying to figure out how they're all gonna talk to each other, how are we actually gonna grow this thing and operate at this capacity that we need to, how are we gonna develop culture, all of these things that come along with scaling a company.
Casey was figuring out how to build a real company, and the results started to pay off.
At that point, we're doing 30 million. We had close to 100 employees operating at a 20% profit margin. When you grow a company that size and you grow that fast, you realize how big the stakes are pretty quickly. You begin to learn that mistakes are costlier at that stage. But the success of it, I'm incredibly grateful for, and it was unexpected. It was never in our heads, we're gonna be this big company. It was always focus on being better as a company, not bigger. And then it was, who are our customers and how do we know them better than anyone? In business building, you can't build it without incredible people. And looking back on Kalo, that's what I appreciate the most, were the people that I did it with. And even though we didn't do everything perfectly, we had a lot of success as a result of the team that we built in growing it. You should be able to communicate to anyone as an entrepreneur, this is the problem that I'm solving. Start there. Then determine what the product is to solve that problem. And just like the rings, even if they're terrible, focus instead of making it perfect on getting it to customers and then talking to as many of those customers as you possibly can about how to make it better. We are so concerned with other people's perception of us and our product and what we're doing that it paralyzes us. And so if you have this idea for a business and you want to start it and you're so concerned with, is it going to be successful? What are people going to think of me? Is it going to be dumb? It's really freeing to realize that people actually aren't thinking about you at all. All you need to do is go find people out there that have problems, because everybody's got problems, and then help people through giving them your solution. You actually are being selfish by not solving the problem that you know people have.
What's up, guys? I hope Casey's starter story inspired you. What I love about Casey's story is he found a painful problem and created a solution that the market needed. That's why he sold over $100 million worth of silicone rings. If you want to understand more about problems, head to the link in the description to download our worksheet of 99 million dollar problems worth solving. And if you're really serious about building something, come join thousands of founders inside Starter Story. All right, see you in the next one. Peace.